Okay, Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All goes Sri Prabhupada. So share my screen. Uh, we'll start with prayer, and then if somebody likes to read, they can read. Otherwise, I can read also. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Sheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Destarni Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Okay, so anybody would like to read today? If not, I can read also. Okay, I can read. First canto, 18th chapter, text number 28. Alabdhatrina bhumyadir asampraptargya sunrita avgnatam ivatmanam manyamanas chukopaha. Synonyms. Alabdha, having not received. Trina, seat of straw. Bhumi, place. Adihi, and so on. Asamprapta, not properly. Not properly received. Argya, water for reception. Sunritaha, sweet words. Avagnatam, thus being neglected. Iva, like that. Atmanam, personally. Manyamanaha, thinking like that. Chukopa, became angry. Ha, in that way. Oh, really? 28th verse? My bookmark is there for 23rd verse. Let me see if you read it or not. Did I put the wrong verse number last time?
No, I think I got it from the recording, but it could
Oh,
be wrong
really?
too.
Okay, yeah, I also say 11828 only. Okay, then
Yeah.
fine. Good. Okay, then we'll go through 28. Perfect. 11828. Translation purport by Sri Prabhupada ki jai. So let's go to translation. The king, not received by any formal welcome, by means of being offered a seat, place, water, and sweet addresses, considered himself neglected, and so thinking he became angry. Oh, last session, maybe I did not do it. That's why somebody spoke last session. Yeah, Vamsi was improved it. That's why I don't remember reading this one. Now I understand. Okay, let me do one thing. Before we go to this verse, I'll briefly go to the previous verses from 23rd, translations only, and then I will continue. So 23rd verse. O Rishis, who are as powerfully pure as the sun, I shall try to describe to you the transcendental pastimes of Vishnu as far as my knowledge is concerned. As the birds fly in the sky, as far as their capacity allows, so do the learned devotees describe the Lord as far as their realization allows. 24-25. Once upon a time, Maharaj Parishit, while engaged in hunting in the forest with bow and arrows, became extremely fatigued, hungry, and thirsty while following the stags. While searching for a reservoir of water, he entered the hermitage of the well-known Samika Rishi and saw the sage sitting silently with closed eyes. Text 26. The Muni's sense organs, breath, mind, and intelligence were all restrained from material activities, and he was situated in a trance apart from the three wakefulness, dream, and unconsciousness, having achieved a transcendental position qualitatively equal with the supreme absolute. The sage, in meditation, was covered by the skin of a stag, and long compressed hair was scattered all over him. The king, whose palate was dry from thirst, asked him for water. Okay. Now we'll go to 20th. The king, not received by any formal welcome, by means of being offered a seat, a place, water, and sweet addresses, considered himself neglected, and so thinking, he became angry. Purport. The law of reception in the course of the Vedic principles that states that even if an enemy is received at home, he must be received with all respects. He should not be given a chance to understand that he has come into the house of an enemy. When Lord Krishna, accompanied by Arjuna and Bhima, approached Jarasandha in Magadha, the respectable enemies were given a royal reception by King Jarasandha. The guest enemy, namely Bhima, was to fight with Jarasandha, and yet they were given a grand reception. At night, they used to sit down together as friends and guests, and in the day, they used to fight, risking life and death. That was the law of reception. The reception law enjoins that a poor man who has nothing to offer his guest should be good enough to offer a straw mat for sitting, a glass of water for drinking, and some sweet words. Therefore, to receive a guest, either friend or foe, there is no expense. It's only a question of good manners. Oh, the next paragraph is also there. Okay. When Maharaj Parishit entered the door of Samika Rishi, he did not expect a royal reception by the rishis because he knew that saints and rishis are not materially rich men. But he never expected that a seat of straw, a glass of water, and some sweet words would be denied to him. He was not an ordinary guest, nor was he an enemy of the rishi, and therefore the cold reception by the rishi astonished the king greatly. As a matter of fact, the king was right to get angry with the rishi when he needed a glass of water very badly. To become angry in such a grave situation was not unnatural for the king, but because the king himself was not less than a great saint, his becoming angry and taking action were astonishing. So it must be accepted that it was so ordained by the supreme will of the Lord. The king was a great devotee of the Lord, and the saint was also as good as the king. But by the will of the Lord, the circumstances were so created that they became ways to the king's becoming unattached to family connection and governmental activities, and thus becoming completely surrendered soul unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. The merciful Lord sometimes creates such awkward positions for his pure devotees in order to drag them towards himself from the mire of material existence. But outwardly, the situation appears to be frustrating to the devotees. The devotees of the Lord are always under the protection of the Lord. And in any condition, frustration or success, the Lord is the supreme guide for the devotees. The pure devotees, therefore, accept all conditions of frustration as blessings from the Lord. Wonderful purport. So, the verse itself is saying the king, when he came, because he was very thirsty and hungry, as described in the previous verses, to the ashram of the Samika Rishi, then he was not offered a proper guest reception, like normally Vedic regulations prescribe, Vedic principles prescribe. So he felt himself neglected, so he became angry. That is the verse itself is the context. So we can discuss briefly. So Prabhupada is taking this opportunity to teach us Vedic culture. Remember, Sri Prabhupada is writing these books for the whole world, not just Indians who know the culture when somebody comes to home, how to receive their guest like that. That's why these are very, very valuable purports for everybody. Those even who don't have any understanding of Vedic culture, those who don't have any experience of Indian upbringing like any of us, still they get the benefit of purports of Srila Prabhupada. So Sri Prabhupada is saying that in the Vedic culture, one of the principles is guest, even if it's uninvited guest, even if the guest is the enemy, when he comes home, they're received nicely. So they're happy. So that nicely doesn't mean we need to spend a lot of money, a lot of opulences we need to show. It doesn't mean that Prabhupada writing. Prabhupada writing, if somebody cannot afford, it can be as simple as giving them a sitting place, like a straw mat, for example, sitting place, or one chair if you have, and then giving them glass of water, and then some sweet words. Of course, better than this is even giving some prasadam also, offering some prasadam. If there is the right time for prasadam for them and prasadam is available like that, we can also offer prasadam also. So like that, those three important things. So Prabhupada is saying these don't require a lot of money. These don't require a lot of effort. Sweet words, giving a place to sit and drink some drinking water to drink. That's all. So that is one principle Prabhupada is writing in the first paragraph. Now, second paragraph Prabhupada is saying that when Parishit Maharaj entered, he didn't have high expectations from the Samyak Rishi because sages don't have too much opulences anyway. So basic thing was expecting. He was not expecting that he will neglect him like that. That's one point. So why is this important? Because based on our expectation, actually, expectations trigger rest of the events. For example, in this case, Parishit Maharaj became angry because his expectation was in Vedic culture, people are supposed to do these three things. They didn't do. That's why he became angry. And of course, he's thirsty also. So that is one lesson we can learn, that we should have a minimal expectations from others. We should be expecting not much service from others, but we should be happy to serve others anytime. That's one lesson we can learn. Second lesson Prabhupada is saying is, actually as a king, when somebody doesn't treat him well like this, then it's natural for a king to become angry. So nothing wrong with that like that. That is the other one point is Prabhupada making. But however, in this case, he's not an ordinary king. He's also a great devotee, Parishit Maharaj. Parishit Maharaj is devotee, Samyak Rishi is also devotee. So because he's a devotee, he would not take such a offense for the not drilling properly like that. Because as practicing devotees, we're meant to not expect respect from others. We are meant to give respect to others like that. So, he would not. So that's why it's surprising here that how come King Parishit Maharaj reacted, became angry like that. So Prabhupada is writing that is a because of the involvement of Krishna's will in that situation. Because of Krishna's will, the pure devotees can act in a certain way which they normally don't act also. That's the important perspective we're getting from Srimad Bhagavatam. Normally, I do not see this portion of the Mahabharata serial and TV, but I heard many people asking questions to my spiritual master so many times, telling that apparently in some movie or serial, I don't know, apparently they show that because of the effect of the Kali, Maharaj Parishit became angry, and then that's why he cursed like that. That's why he put the dead snake on top of it. He became angry like that, it seems. But Srimad Bhagavatam perspective is higher. I don't know if Mahabharata also speaks like that. I'm not sure. But at least Srimad Bhagavatam perspective is giving a higher picture for us. He's a pure devotee, Parishit Maharaj. So he's not affected by Kali, like we normally think. Number one. Number two, he's not affected by modes of nature. But he's put into that situation like that by the will of Krishna. Why? This will lead to speaking of the glorious Srimad Bhagavatam for all our benefit now. Like we are reading now Srimad Bhagavatam like that. That's one point Prabhupada is talking about the purport. That's an important point. Then, second point is talking about is actually Krishna arranged the circumstance in such a way for poor Parishit Maharaj so that he can leave the family things, kingly responsibilities. He can leave all of that, even though he took care of it responsibly until now. Now he can do it with detachment. Now, with detachment, he can come out of the responsibilities and focus fully on Krishna consciousness now, like that. So that's a nice thing he's getting to do now. Because ultimately, our ultimate goal is to go closer to Krishna. If something is helping towards this, that is a nice thing like that. So that's what is being indicated here. And then Prabhupada is also writing, Krishna might create some awkward circumstances sometimes so that they can devotee can come closer to him like that also. So he commonly gives example of himself also, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. In his household life, he started many businesses, thinking that he will become a big business shot like that. But most of the time, everything failed. So even at some point of time, he finally took the Vanaprastha, thinking that let me focus on Krishna consciousness. Don't worry about this money making anymore like that. Otherwise, he had a lot of hope that he'll earn a lot of money and then use that for uh, preaching Krishna consciousness like that. So he used that example that Krishna arranges life such a way that you could take full shelter of Krishna like that. Similarly, when we in our life circumstances also, if we enter some distress circumstances, we need to do practically deal with them. But understand that's an opportunity for us to take shelter of Krishna more and more like that. That's one lesson we can learn. And then other thing is we understand that it's Krishna's mercy for me to somehow get closer to Krishna like that. Now, yeah, another thing Prabhupada writes in the end of the purport is, so pure devotees accept all conditions of frustration as blessings from Krishna like that. So whether it is because they understand Krishna is our well-wisher and Krishna is a protector. So anything is happening in our life is happening under Krishna's control. So will help. This will become good somehow. So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu commonly says, every situation may not be good, but we can always see in a circumstance or a situation like that. That means, let us say I have a great distressful situation that is happening right now, but I can have a lot of other good things in my life that I can count my blessings towards. So that we can do. When we count a lot of blessings in our life, then when distressful situation comes, we can still be grateful and we can deal with the circumstance like that. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu also describes how to deal with this difficult circumstances. One thing we can do is we can count with gratitude. We can count all the good things that are in our life when everything is going well. So when something goes wrong, then we think, oh, this is only one thing going wrong. Everything else is great like that. That is one thing. And then he also says we need to look up to Krishna in the difficult circumstance. That means take shelter of Krishna like that. So that way, then we can get strength, spiritual strength to deal with the circumstance like that. And third aspect he says is we can see out of all the good things that we have in life, is there something that can counteract this bad thing that is happening in our life like that, difficult circumstances in life like that. That will also help us to go through the difficult circumstances like that. So yeah, those are a few points on this verse. Anybody has any other comments or questions on this verse before we go to the next one? Okay. If not, we can go to the 29th verse. Let me go to 29th verse. Yeah. Any of you would like to read 29th verse? If you're in a position to read only. Okay, I can read next then. 29th verse. Abhuta Purva Sahasa Shitridbyam Arditatmanaha Brahmanam Prati Abhut Brahman Matsuro Manyurevacha. Synonyms. Abhuta Purvaha, unprecedented. Sahasa, circumstantially. Shut, hunger. Tridbyam, as well as by thirst. Ardita, being distressed. Atmanaha, of his self. Brahmanam, unto a Brahmana. Prati, against. Abhut, became. Brahman, O Brahmanas. Matsaraha, envious. Manyuhu, angry. Eva, thus. Cha, and. Translation purport by Sri Prabhupada. Sri Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. O Brahmanas, the king's anger and envy directed toward the Brahmana sage were unprecedented, being that circumstances had made him hungry and thirsty. Purport. For a king like Maharaj Parishit to become angry and envious, especially at a sage and Brahmana, was undoubtedly unprecedented. The king knew well that Brahmanas, sages, children, women, and old men are always beyond the jurisdiction of punishment. Similarly, The king, even though he commits a great mistake, is never to be considered a wrongdoer. But in this case, Maharaj Parishit became angry and envious at the sage due to his thirst and anger by the will of the Lord. The king was right to punish his subject for coldly receiving him or neglecting him. But because the culprit was a sage and a Brahmana, it was unprecedented. As the Lord is never envious of anyone, so also the Lord's devotee is never envious of anyone. The only justification for Maharaj Parishit's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. So if you notice, two times Prabhupada wrote in the purport, that was by the will of the Lord because it was ordained by the Lord. Like that he wrote, right? So one word I wanted to look up in the dictionary. What is the word? I forgot. Unprecedented, right? Never done or known before. Okay. So now, basically the context of this was, like previous verse we heard about how he became angry. Now this was saying, King Parishit Maharaj directed his anger and envy towards him, is described. Uh, but he never directed such anger before towards Brahmana like that. So, so 2 points. One is the storyline was uh, Sutta Goswami is describing that King Parishit became angry and envious, and then he directed that anger and envy to Brahmana also, like that is describing, and that was externally that was triggered by extreme hunger and thirst of Parishit Maharaj, like that. That's the storyline from verse perspective. Then verse has the word unprecedented. That means never before. Mm. Oh, what is this? This verse and what I'm sharing on the screen and my book is difficult, different translation, right? Okay, nice. Oh, unprecedented word is not there in this translation, but they're nicely telling, which he had never before directed toward Brahmana. Okay, this is easier to read. Okay, okay. So 2 points Prabhupada is making this purport. One point is that in Vedic culture, a king is not meant to punish the dependent five people. Who are this? Brahmanas or sages, children, women, old people. I think those are four, right? Yeah, cows are not listed here. Generally, the five people, including cows, are protected, offered protection in Vedic culture, like that. Cows are not listed here. Instead of cows, they said Brahmanas and sages, like that. Two different mentioned. So they're not punished, it seems. So now that is one point is making. But still, King Parishit in this case punished him. Yeah, that's one point. Second point is actually king, even though he commits mistake, is never to be considered a wrongdoer. That means he is not subject to any punishment or anything like that. That's the other point we is making. So, more important point, which is coming from previous purport also, that Parishit Maharaj is directing his envy towards Brahmana, which he never did before, is only happening because of the will of the Lord, like that. Because the Lord wanted the next circumstances to follow Srimad Bhagavatam, like that. Let us say we are in that circumstance, we will not understand this right away. We'll know it after a few days, right? So that's why we need to be patient. Whether one circumstance may be good or bad, we don't know. I don't know, I remember the whole story, but I'll briefly mention. There is a story, it's called Farmer's Chinese farmer story. Basically, there was one Chinese farmer, it seems. He had uh, he had a small farm or a field, agricultural field that he needs to take care of. So he doesn't have a horse, but all the neighbors have horse, so they can till the land with the help of horse, like that. In those days, there are no machines, right? Tractors and all that. So they used to take the help of horse to till the land. Previous other neighbors, but he doesn't have it. So one day suddenly, some horses came, it seems, to home for him. So then he says, "Oh." good fortune, everybody is saying, wow, you're so fortunate, you got horses. He says, good fortune, bad fortune. Who can say? Like that he says. This is a common statement he uses, basically, phrase. Um, so horses came, but he's happy, he's using the horses and doing the farming also with the horses like that. But then he has a son, uh, is a elder son, is a older son only. And that son, what did he do? He was training one of the horses, and while training the horses, horses are tamed, right, so that they can listen to the master for doing the work. So when taming the horses, that son fell down from the horse, and his one of the finger got broken, basically finger or leg got broken, basically. So now, oh, everybody came say, oh, so unfortunate, your son's leg is broken, like that they said. Then this Chinese farmer said, good fortune, ill fortune, who can say? Like that he said. So then what happened is, at that time, there was a drafting going on. That means like government will ask all the citizens, able citizens, to come and help in the war like that. So they came to this village also, and they told all the children, all the young men should go to the war like that. But then this particular son of this farmer were exempted from going to war because his leg is broken now, so he's not fit to join the war. Oh, then everybody said, "Oh, so you're so fortunate. See, mm, your son doesn't need to go to the war anymore." And then Chinese farmer says, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" Like that. So then, after some time, all the I don't remember the whole story. That is one that much I remember. Something about all the horses goes away or something like that also comes, and that's also for his good only. But essentially, uh, moral of the story, lesson from the story is sometimes we cannot immediately recognize whether whatever is happening in our life is it for our good or bad, because the later things that will come after that circumstance may be good for us, like that. That is a point to note. So similarly here, we are hearing that by the will of the Lord, Parishit Maharaj got into this anger and envy and he directed towards the Brahmana sage also, like that. So that is one thing we remember. So always we cannot be bogged down with one instance, one circumstance in our life like that. We should see bigger picture of our life. That's another lesson we can learn from this verse also. So we'll pause there. Any other comments or questions from this verse before we go to the next one? Okay, we'll go to the next verse then if no questions, comments. Text 30. Okay, text 30. Let's go through. Satu Brahmari Sheram se Katasum Uragam Rusha Vinirgachan Danushkotya Nidhaya Puramagataha. Synonyms. Saha, the king. Tu, however, Brahmarshe of the Brahmana sage, Amse on the shoulder, Gata Asum, lifeless, Uragam, snake, Rusha in anger, Vinirgachan while leaving, Danu Kotya with the front of the bow. I was listening to Ramayana this weekend in classes. They were using the word Gachanti multiple times. That means going like that. Here also is saying we are leaving. Like Dhanu Kotya, well, with the front of the bow. Nidaya, by placing it. Puram, play palace. Agataha, returned. Translation, purport by Sri Prabhupada ki jai. While leaving, the king, being so insulted, picked up a lifeless snake with his bow and angrily placed it on the shoulder of the sage. Then he returned to his palace. Purport. The king thus treated the sage tit for tat. Although he was never accustomed to such silly actions, by the will of the Lord, the king, while going away, found a dead snake in front of him, and he thought that the sage who had coldly received him, I think coldly received him, thus might be coldly rewarded by being offered a garland of a dead snake. In the ordinary course of dealing, this was not very unnatural, but in the course of Maharaj Parikshit's dealing with the Brahmana sage, this was certainly unprecedented. It is so happened by the will of the Lord. If you notice, Sri Prabhupada is emphasizing again 2 times that this happened by the will of the Lord only, like that. So the point Prabhupada is making the purport is that while he was going, because the sage did not receive him, did not receive him well, as a guest, king came to his home, but did not receive him well. So while going, because he's like as if like tit for tat, the sage Parishit Maharaj saw a dead snake. He used his bow to lift it and put it around the neck of the sage itself, who was in trance meditation right now. So normally, for ordinary people, it's is okay, tit for tat. He did that, so I did this, like that. But because king is a devotee, Parishit Maharaj, nice devotee, it's just not ordinary for him. It's not expected for him to do it. He never did any silly things like that before. So that's why it's only because of the will of the Lord that this happened. Like that, Prabhupada is emphasizing the purport again, like that. So another thing we can learn from this verse is that we, as practicing devotees, we always don't need to do tit for tat. So when somebody does something that hurts us in some way, we can always take, depending upon the circumstance, depending upon relationship with the person, we have to deal with it a certain way. But at least one thing which can do is, you should not have hurtful feelings in the heart that this guy should be destroyed or this guy should be hurt. I will take care of him like again, like that. That hurtful feelings we should not have. How can we not have that feelings when we understand that whatever is happening to us in our life is because of Krishna's sanction, number one. Number two, maybe I've done something in the past like this. So that's why it's coming back to him, to me, through this person. When we see that I am responsible for this, whatever other person is doing right now, then we don't have any animosity towards the other person who is doing harm to us. Actually, I was reading yesterday, I think yesterday or today, Chaitanya Prabhu wrote an article on this topic. Yeah, not this topic. Let me see. That was about Kali Yuga. Yeah, that's a slightly different topic here. I read this also somewhere recently. But basically, the point is that we should see that others are just an instrument of our own karma from the past. Number one. Number two, we see that this because of Krishna's sanction only is acting like this to me. If we see these two things, then we're not developing animosity to that person. That's one thing we discuss. Second thing we also contemplate is, am I a perfect person all the time? I hurted so many people in the past, either knowingly or unknowingly also sometimes. Sometimes I don't want to hurt them, but I hurt them anyway because I cannot control my mouth, speech or something, whatever. I might have hurted many other people like that before. So when I hurt people accidentally, I want people to forgive me. So when somebody else is hurting me accidentally or out of emotion or something, out of coming out of more of passion, ignorance for some time, then we should also develop forgiveness for them. If we forgive them, then it is beneficial for them also, it is beneficial for us also. Because when we forgive other person for whatever they done, we don't have that in our mind consumed, we're not absorbed with the topic anymore. So we can peacefully do our devotion service also. So that's the principle of forgiveness also. So basically, this is how we can tolerate when somebody does some harm for us like that. But practically, we might have to do something. For example, if our children is doing something which is not good for them in the future, if they repeat with us or anybody else, then we can always teach them a lesson. We can always tell them. But from the heart level, we should forgive them. We should not have any animosity towards them. That's what it means. So there's a lesson we can learn from this verse. And pause there. Any other comments on this verse before we go to the next one?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat pranam to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Prabhuji, I know in the spiritual world, in the spiritual path, we can forgive the devotees, But in the material also, we are supposed to forgive, Prabhuji, if they are going on repeating again and again.
Yeah. Basically,
But
remember I told you two things. Forgiveness is internal disposition, internal consciousness. Externally, we might have to show anger also is okay. But showing anger is one thing, and being consumed by anger is a different thing. That means internally I'm not feeling angry towards them, but I want to teach them so that they don't repeat next time again. So for that sake, I can raise my voice, I can express anger like that little bit, but I should not be overpowered by anger. That means overpowered by anger means when anger overpowers me, then I don't know how I'm talking, how I'm treating the other person like that. You should not get into that mode basically. How will that come? By the purity. As we practice spiritual path nicely, chanting and hearing regularly, then with the purity, we can control our emotions and act in such a way that we're teaching them a lesson also, but internally we don't have any animosity towards them because we are understanding these points I discussed, right? I don't know if that makes sense. Internal consciousness versus external behavior can be different. Make sense, Mati?
Thank you.
Sure. Any other comments or questions? If not, we can go to the next verse. Someone would like to read the 31st verse?
Prabhu, I can read now that
Sure.
I'm home.
Sure.
Esa kim niprista sesha karano milite kshanaha mrisha samadir aho svit kim nu syat kshatra pandu bihi. Synonym: Esha, this. Kim, weather. Nibrita asesha, meditative mood. Karanaha, senses. Milita, closed. Ikshanaha, eyes. Mrisha, false. Samadhi, trance. Aho, remains. Swit, if it is so. Kim, either. Nu, but. Syat, maybe. Kshatra bandhu bihi, by the lower. Kshatriya. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Upon returning, he began to contemplate and argue within himself whether the sage had actually been in meditation, with senses concentrated and eyes closed, or whether he had just been feigning trance just to avoid receiving a lower kshatriya. Purport. The king, being a devotee of the Lord, did not approve of his own action, and thus he began to wonder whether the sage was really in a trance or was just pretending in order to avoid receiving the king, who was a kshatriya and therefore lower in rank. Repentance comes in mind of a good soul as soon as he commits something wrong. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami do not believe that the king's action was due to his past misdeeds. The arrangement was so made by the Lord just to call the king back home, back to Godhead. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the plan was made by the will of the Lord, and by the will of the Lord, the situation of frustration was created. The plan was that for his so-called misdeed, the king could be cursed by an inexperienced Brahmana boy infected by the influence of Kali, and thus the king would leave his hearth and home for good. His connections with Srila Shukadeva Goswami would enable the presentation of the great Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhu, can you scroll up a little bit?
Oh, sure.
Srimad Bhagavatam, which is considered to be the book incarnation of the Lord. This book incarnation of the Lord gives much fascinating information of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, like his Rasa Leela with the spiritual cowherd themselves of Rajabhumi. This specific pastime of the Lord has a special significance because anyone who properly learns about this particular pastime of the Lord will certainly be dissuaded from the mundane sex desire and be placed on the path of sublime devotional service to the Lord. The pure devotee's mundane frustration is meant to elevate the devotee to a higher transcendental position. By placing Arjuna and the Pandavas in frustration due to the intrigue of their cousin brothers, the prelude of the battle of Kurukshetra was created by the Lord. This was to incarnate the sound representative of the Lord, Bhagavad Gita. So by placing King Parikshit in an awkward position, the incarnation of Srimad Bhagavatam was created by the will of the Lord. Being distressed by hunger and thirst was only a show, because the king endured much, even in the womb of his mother. He was never disturbed by the glaring heat of the Brahmastra released by Aswatthama. The king's distressed condition was certainly unprecedented. The devotees, like Maharaj Parikshit, are powerful enough to forbear such distresses by the will of the Lord, and they are never disturbed. The situation in this case was therefore all planned by the Lord. What a wonderful purport. Um, so Prabhu, so the basic gist of this thing is, so this pastimes was happening, Parikshit being cursed by Shringi, Maharaj Parikshit is being thirsty, and all of that happened is because it was Krishna's plan, and Krishna wanted Srimad Bhagavatam to be delivered through Parikshit Maharaj. So he was basically glorifying his devotee. He glorifies in various ways, and so Lord also wanted to glorify Parikshit Maharaj and delivered Srimad Bhagavatam through him. So everything that happens, sometimes it's just by the will of the Lord. So Prabhu, that's the gist of this paragraph for me.
Wonderful, Madhu. Thank you for sharing. So that's the main point. And one other thing we can also see here is that how Prabhupada writes that repentance comes in the mind of a good soul as soon as it comes something wrong like that. So that's the important principle also we can learn. For example, I don't know, you heard this one. When you're cultivating, let us say I have some bad habit. I'm cultivating good habit. The way it progresses is, I recognize first I have this bad habit. I don't want to commit this bad habit again. I don't want to do this bad action again like that. Let us say I decide like that. But I cannot immediately follow that. So what will happen is it goes through a progression is described normally. What is the progression? Progression is we commit the bad habit anyway again, but right after committing it, we recognize it. For example, I have the bad habit of saying something to my friend or wife or son like that. Whereas I don't want to do that. So then I don't want to hurt their feelings like that. So what will happen is my slip of the tongue automatically it comes. But as soon as I say it, I'll remember, oh my God, I should not have said like that. Okay. So that is a phase. That means good intention is there, but bad action will come still. Okay, that is one phase. Then slowly that will transform into, as we practice doing like that, and slowly it will come to state wherein we actually don't do that activity also. That means before we do it, we respond properly. That means we don't slip our tongue also like that. But it is a phase that will go through. So that's what here is described. And then that is one point we can learn. Okay, that is a phase of transition from bad habit to good habit. Another lesson we can learn is that means even if we recognize after doing a bad action, we should give some credit for ourselves, but work towards overcoming that bad habit, of course. That's one principle. Another lesson we can learn here is that remember in this particular circumstance, what happened? Parishit Maharaj, at the fit of that emotion, he thought, oh, this sage did not receive me properly. He's insulting me. So he assumed that. And then he acted on that. If you look at mundane storyline, of course, the internal principle Prabhupada is sharing, Jiva Goswami is telling us, and Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur are telling us that it all happened by the will of the Supreme Lord. But let us say we keep that aside for a minute. Still, what we see here is in the that moment of emotions, he reacted quickly with an assumption. The assumption that sage is just acting to be in trance. That's why he's not receiving me. He didn't want to receive me. That's why he's acting in trance like that. That's the assumption he made. So, whereas now after coming home, he's checking his own assumption. Oh, is that the right assumption? Or maybe he's really in trance, maybe. That's why he could not receive me. So that is checking the emotion now. that assumption is checking now. So that's a good thing. Actually, we as practicing devotees also, we can learn a lesson. Whenever we assume something that is not good intention from on behalf of others, we should be careful. We should always see there may be another reason for them to act in this way, and we need to give them benefit of doubt unless proven wrong like that. Then we don't have animosity towards everybody other than like that nicely, and we can forgive them also like that easily. So that's another principle we can learn like that. Making, in fact, in the conflict resolution courses that Rajbihari Prabhu teaches, is one of the senior devotee. He teaches assumptions are one of the important thing, that because of wrong assumptions will actually fights happen, conflicts happen between multiple people, it seems. So that's why we should be careful with our assumptions like that. Okay, that's clear. And it's not easy to question our assumptions. Many times we think I'm 100% correct. I know for sure. I saw how they're looking. I saw how they're talking. I saw 10 times ago, 10 days ago, how they're looking. Our mind will tell all those things to tell that the assumption is correct. But still, we should understand that I am not Krishna to understand other person's mind, other person's heart. So we should give benefit of doubt to the other person because of that. So that's another lesson we can learn here also. So then, if you notice, the Mataji's point that she mentioned, how this whole thing was organized by the will of the Lord, so that we all get the beautiful Srimad Bhagavatam to relish like that. And then that's not just Prabhupada speaking, but also our Acharyas also commenting the same way. That's confirmed in this purport by Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also quoted here in this verse. Then I think that's right. Argue with himself. Yeah. So then, yeah, that repenting. And another lesson is repentance. So not only checking our assumption, but we should repent for a bad action. We should not justify. Oh, anyway, according to Vedic principles, sage was supposed to receive me properly as a guest. But because he didn't receive me, I put the snake. So it's a good thing I did only. Nothing wrong with that. We should not justify our wrong actions like that all the time. So we should repent for our bad actions also. That's another principle to learn from this verse. Yeah. Any other comments or questions on this verse? We don't have time for another verse, I think. We can try. Okay, if no comments, we can try reading another verse. If one of you would like to read next verse, you can do. Otherwise, I can also read. Let me know. Okay, I can read. Tasya putro atitejasvi viharan balakor bakai rajnagam prapitam tatam srutva tatredam abravit. Synonyms. Tasya, his, the sages. Putraha, son. Ati, extremely. Tejasvi, powerful. Viharan, while playing. Balakaha, with boys. Arbakai, who were all childish. Rajna, by the king. Agam, distress. Prapitam, made to have. Tatam, the father. Srutva, by hearing. Tatra, then and there. Idam, this. Abravit, spoke. Translation purport by Sri Prabhupada, Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The sage had a son who was very powerful, being a Brahmana's son. While he was playing with inexperienced boys, he heard of his father's distress, which was occasioned by the king. Then and there the boy spoke as follows. Purport. Due to Maharaj Parikshit's good government, even a boy of tender age who was playing with other inexperienced boys could become as powerful as a qualified Brahmana. This boy was known as Sringi, and he achieved good training in Brahmacharya by his father so that he could be as powerful as Brahmana even at that age. But because the age of Kali was seeking an opportunity to spoil the cultural heritage of the four orders of life, The inexperienced boy gave a chance for the age of Kali to enter into the field of Vedic culture. Hatred of the lower orders of life began from this Brahmana boy under the influence of Kali, and thus cultural life began to dwindle day after day. The first victim of Brahmanical injustice was Maharaj Parishit, and thus the protection given by the king against the onslaught of Kali was slackened. So, what we are hearing here is that so one thing is King Parishit. What we heard, one thing was King Parishit acted by putting a dead snake around the neck of this sage that we heard, Samik Rishi. But then, and then he went home and repented, we heard in the last verse. Now, what happened is, in the meantime, the son of the sage, his name is Stringi, he came back home and he saw this king doing this offensive act like this, putting dead snake around sage. And so that boy started to speak, it's described. The boy is actually curses, that is the next verse. So, but the point of this verse is that even though he was playing with inexperienced boys, he was a powerful Brahmana. How come he is a powerful Brahmana? Prabhupada is attributing two things for this boy to become powerful. One is King Parishit Maharaj was ruling so nicely that the citizens are developing Brahmanic qualifications nicely like that, are growing in higher consciousness like that. That is one point Prabhupada is making. That's a credit to King also. Second point Prabhupada is making the purport is that how the father took responsibility. In what way? Father trained the boy nicely in Brahmanical culture, in Brahmacharya, like that. So that's why the boy became very powerful like that. So as parents, especially when our children are young, we also need to take responsibility for our children to give the proper training. Because once they become teenagers, it's very hard to give any training. So whatever we have is in the early days, early years of their life, we got to give a lot of love to them and nice training also. The training should be in such a way that children want to accept it, not in a way that we think is best for them, but without considering whether they're accepting it positively or they're seeing it as just nonsense only like that. We should carefully observe and give them proper training like that, especially in young ages. Then they will get used to that, and then they will have firm faith in the principles that they learn in childhood and they continue the rest of life. That's one thing coming out of this purport. Another thing is that influence of the Kali. Remember in the last section verses we talked about how Kali did not really influence Parishit Maharaj like that. But in case of this Sringi, the Brahmana boy, Kali has influenced him. That's why you'll see in the next set of verses, this Brahmana boy feels himself proud. And he says, this Kshatriya is so low class. Why did he do like that to my father? Like that, he say in the next coming verses, basically. So this way the hate towards the lower caste started like that is described, purpose is describing the purport. That is because of the influence of the Kali. And that's why Vedic cultural life began to dwindle day by day after that, like that. When Brahmanas are not treating lower caste properly, then naturally the system fell down like that. Nobody wanted to follow the system. Why? He only can chant mantras, I can also chant mantras. Why he only needs to do deity worship? I can only do deity worship. Like that, it all starts basically. So that is a other principle Sri Prabhupada is writing in the purport for a benefit. So we'll pause there. Any other comments or questions from anybody on this verse? Okay, if not, we can start in 33rd verse next time. We can offer obeisances. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sri Prabhupada ki jai. Let's offer obeisance to all the devotees of the Lord. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kupasindu bevacha paditana pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you so much, devotees. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.